this is going to be a fun interactive discussion. I'm not going to lecture you, but I'm going to have a dialogue with you. I just returned as the U.S. ambassador to Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean. And it was an amazing adventure. I was appointed by President Biden, and there are kind of two general types of ambassadors. There's a political ambassador. There are generally about 60 of those in the world, and I was one of those. And then there are career ambassadors, and generally there are a couple hundred of those or more. And those folks work through the State Department process and system, and they are foreign service officers, and it takes about 30 years to become an ambassador. And as a political ambassador, we get plucked out of our normal lives and put into an ambassadorship. And it can be controversial. You'll read stories about should there be political ambassadors or not. And of course, I would argue that yes, you should have political ambassadors because we bring a unique life experience and a unique career experience to the role. And so I'm going to use my personal experience to talk about this topic of communication for social and political change, because we're living in a world today that is being changed on a daily basis by communication. And so I would say that all of you have the potential to be an ambassador. All of you have the potential to change the world using your skills, especially your communication skills, because what I found as ambassador is the job is largely a communications job. Like you wouldn't kind of think that, but it truly is. Like most of my day, every day was different, but it was the hardest job I've ever had. I've done a lot of different things in my career, and I'm happy to talk about those. But being an ambassador was the hardest job I've ever had, and you would not expect that living in Barbados. So in Barbados, it is 85. If you check right now, check the weather forecast. It's 85 and sunny. I would bet $20 on it. It's 85 and sunny, 85 and sunny, 85 and sunny, and it is this beautiful island. It has beaches galore. I got to meet and spend time with Rihanna, which was amazing. She's on my phone if you want to see later. But she is the classic, she is truly called a national hero by the Barbados government. And she's in Heroes Park. There's a big park on the waterfront. And she is the coolest person. I was a fan, but I was not a crazy fan. I'm a really crazy fan now because she's so nice. And the funny thing, you can't really see this, but I could show you later. I should have sent this. This would be my one slide. It's me and Rihanna. Yeah. And what's funny, so you can kind of see she has this blouse with this big thing on it. Well, I met with her in my office for half an hour, and we were talking about like policy issues, about youth violence, about just a lot of things that she cared about, because she spends a lot of time on the island. She is Barbadian. She's not American. She doesn't have a U.S. passport. She has a visa, which is why she was at the embassy. And we were talking about all these cool things. And after we visited, we went downstairs to take some photos. And what I didn't realize, because I was looking at her like this, is the back of her shirt was backless. Like there was no fabric. So when I put my hand on her back for the photo, it was like stuck to her. And I was like, okay, I'm touching Rihanna. Like, should I leave it there or should I take it off? Because it'd be weird either way. And I just left it, and it was fine. It was fine. And as I left the meeting, she gave me a hug and she whispered, she said, "You're fun." She said, "I hope this isn't the last time we meet." I'm like, so there will be another time. I will tell one other fun Rihanna story. So I am a big fan of art, and I think art plays, an important role in diplomacy. And there is a program created by President Kennedy in the 1960s called Art in Embassies. And it essentially brings American artists into these different embassies, and you have exhibits, and you can assemble your own. And I assembled my own, but in addition to that, I commissioned some glass feathers by a Native American artist. His name is Dan Friday, and Dan Friday is a kind of a not struggling, but he hasn't hit, stardom, but he works hard. He works hard every day, makes glass. It's very cool. But he makes these like 12 to 18 inch glass feathers. So I reached out to the gallery where he shows his work in Seattle, and I said, I'd like to commission these, I'd like to commission a feather for each of my prime ministers, because I was ambassador to not one country, I was ambassador to 7 countries. So I had more countries than any US ambassador in the world. And that, I will tell you, has really made it a very hard job, because I was constantly traveling to these different islands, which is cool because you're flying and you've got a driver and a police escort, and there are some cool things about it. You never have to worry about parking. Usually you're in an armored vehicle. It was cool, but it was a lot of moving around. So I commissioned these feathers, and I said to Dan Friday, I said, I'd like to pick colors. A lot of the flags have the same colors, so I said, let's just pick some colors. Let's make 7 or not. Let's make 10 of these glass feathers, just in case they break in transit, and just make them all the same. So I just give it out, and he's like, I won't do that. And I was like, I'm commissioning 10 feathers, and he's like, no, I'm going to do 1 in each of the colors of the country. So he did a custom flag for each one. And I will tell you, giving those to the prime ministers was just such a warm introduction for me. But what was fun is I got these feathers, I'm in my office, and I found out that Rihanna was coming the next day, and I have 3 extra feathers. And so at the end of our meeting, I said, before we wrap up, I want to give you this. And it's actually something from my home. I'm part Native American. I gave her this feather, and she was visibly moved by it. And I'm like, is she acting, or is this real? And she really liked it. So I have a photo of her with the feather, and she's beaming. And but in the box, I put the information for the artist. I just threw it in the box. So fast forward, a couple months go by. The artist is traveling. I think he's in Dubai or someplace. And he gets a direct message from Bad Girl Riri, and which is her handle. And he's like, who is this? She's like, it's Rihanna. And he's like, no, really, who is this? And they started this communication, and she's like, I love your work. I want to come visit your studio when I'm, back in, or when I'm in Seattle. And it reminded me how important communication is. She did that. She didn't have her staff do that. It was something that was meaningful to her, and she took the initiative to do it. I didn't know. I never knew until I talked with the artist, because I was all excited to tell him that I had given Rihanna one of his feathers, and he's like, oh, I know. I've already talked with her. But I think, so that's just a fun little story just about the power of communication, and it can be through diplomacy. What would you say, just throw out a few words, you don't have to raise your hand. What comes to mind when you hear diplomacy? What are some words that come to mind?
Compromise.
Yep, compromise, formality. What else?
Soft.
Relationship. Yep.
Soft.
Soft. Yep. Soft power.
Connection.
Yep. What
Culture.
else?
Culture.
Culture. Yep.
Community.
Yep.
Exchange.
Yes. All of those.
Formality,
Exactly.
dialogue.
Yes. Those are all good. And and all those things go into diplomacy, because when I got nominated by the president, they send you to ambassador school, and it's a 3-week class in this. It's kind of like you watch those bad FBI Academy TV shows or something. It's literally like that. It's a campus. It's out in the middle of nowhere, so you can't leave, and you're there for 3 weeks with the same group of people. So I have 25 other ambassadors who are my friends, including the ambassador to Russia, which is interesting. But it doesn't matter if you have been an ambassador 5 times, if you've never been an ambassador, if you're a political ambassador, a career ambassador, you're thrown in and you're all equal. And that for me was one of the highlights of being ambassador. I didn't know at the time, because I didn't know what I was doing, that meeting those people and building those connections was one of the best parts of my experience as ambassador. And I think the two words that I heard you all say that resonate most with me is relationship and connection, because my job as ambassador and your job as a professional communicator is to connect with people and to connect with them, where they are, how they are, geographically where they are. And so like the tools that you all have, it's amazing. I was telling Roberta, so I'm here largely because Roberta was my favorite professor at WSU. She loves attention, which is why I put her up here. But I actually, when I was going to, so I'm a Cougar. When I was going to school here, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I transferred from the UW because they don't have a good program, and I came here as a junior, and everyone said, oh, you have to take this, COM, 225? 225. You have to take COM 225, and it's like this it'll weed out the chaff, and you have to, there's all this pressure, high pressure. And we had to test to get into it. And they're like, well, who did you sign up for? Which class? And I said, Roberta Kelly. They're like, no, like drop the class immediately. She's so hard. And I was terrified. I think that was the moment I was like, okay, if I can do this, I can do anything. It all started there. It all started at 225. But actually, I will share that I really do think a lot of my success I can tie back to my time at Washington State University, and also to the standards that Roberta set for me and my fellow students. And she had this fun saying, the ABCs of writing. Accuracy, brevity, clarity. And I truly have used that for the last 30 years. Like, I use it with new people who are on my team. I used it at the embassy. You would be shocked at the things that happen. The quality, the details matter. So if you're not a detail person, you're gonna have to work extra hard, because like you may have noticed, the name of my talk here was not correct on the poster outside, and I spotted it. I saw it. I was like, wait, I'm not talking about concentration camps. Like, that's not my program. But I'm like, but those things matter. So someone, innocent mistake, but you can't afford that. So if you're doing diplomacy and you're working with a foreign government or an adversary, you can't afford to make a mistake like that. And so I think when a lot of the work that I started at WSU was all around writing is the key. And I know not everyone is a great writer, and that's okay. You can learn to be a much better writer. You just have to apply yourself. But you can't say, oh, someone else will do it, or ChatGPT will do it. ChatGPT is pretty cool. We had, within the State Department, we had our own AI chat. It was called State Chat. And we would write policy papers with it. And they were really good. Like, I'm like, whoa. Like, they're like, oh, you have to edit it and you have to review it. And I'm like, well, it looks good to me. I put in all the keywords. It looks good to me. But I don't think you can rely on that, and because you're going to be in situations where you don't, you're going to have to use your own brain and your own judgment to determine the path forward. Or you're in a conversation with a prime minister who you know is lying to you, and what do you say? Like, how do you preserve the relationship, but call it out at the same time. And so those are issues that you all hopefully will learn in your career. But I think a question for you is, what does quality communication for social or political change look like? Raise your hand, please.
I mean, probably starting from a place of empathy towards the other person, trying to understand where they're at, and understanding, how you're going to build upon that to reach both of you and understanding each other.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Absolutely. I saw someone in the back. Right there.
I mean, you kind of hit on it, but yeah, just like welcoming and giving people like what they know and not going too far from the current, just like baby steps.
I don't know exactly how to explain it, but it's like we learned in class a couple weeks ago, like to be a vessel for voices that aren't always heard, especially in like social pieces. So just being transparent and highlighting voices as a vessel of truth.
I don't know, like she was saying, being honest and transparent in what you're doing and what your plans are. So people so that don't be surprised with, I guess, what ends up happening or anything.
Does truth matter in communications? I agree. Not everyone agrees. It's not always. I think there's a lot of miscommunication or misdirection or campaigns to undermine. One could be a political party or could be anything. So that's what. So does anyone here want to be a diplomat someday? Well, I highly encourage you, because I will tell you, I'm going to sit for a moment, but one of my grandmother, who is the Native American, she said her message to me was, do what makes you happy in your life, because we can't always do that, because we have to take steps to get where we want to go. But if you're not doing something that you enjoy, it's hard to, advance and to I just think that I've definitely made decisions in my life that led to where I am today. And it's funny, because Roberta knows this, yesterday I got a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Puget Sound Business Journal, which is really cool, but I'm not dead yet, and I'm not retired, but it's funny because I think being an ambassador is such a rare thing. I didn't know many ambassadors. I mean, later in my professional career, I knew ambassadors, but I'd never been to an embassy. I'd never been going to an ambassador. If you ever get invited to ambassador's residence, go, because that is like the hot ticket, because they're usually really nice. They have, the alcohol is not always that very good, not that good, but the residences are really designed as event venues. They're designed as diplomacy settings for the ambassador and others, and so we entertained all the time. I entertained people constantly. I had actually the Congressional Black Caucus came to visit, and I got to host 12 members of the Congressional Black Caucus, including some really famous people like Clyburn and Maxine Waters, and it was very cool. And it was I'm hosting this. It was very cool. And yeah, people using those settings, so taking advantage of opportunities. So what I would also say is, if this is just my career advice, is you do have to visualize what you want, and I think that you just have to put it out there, that this is what I want. And I always thought, I did know an ambassador, and he was the ambassador to China, so that's a big ambassadorship, and I didn't think, I could be ambassador to China, but I was like, I could do that job. It feels like a PR job. It's, you attend all these events, you negotiate things, there's lots of communication. So I thought I could do that. And so when I do a lot of political work in Seattle, and historically I've hosted a ton of events at my house. And one day I was telling this political fundraiser, I said, you are so good at what you do, one day you're going to get a presidential campaign. And when you do, I better be the first person you call. So years later, he calls me and he said, I got Joe Biden, and do you want to host him at your home? And it would be the first Seattle fundraiser for the campaign that he won. And I said, yeah, totally. I'm like, yes. So we hosted this event. It was a big hit. This young woman came with him on the day of the event, very quiet, but she was like in charge. But she had she was clearly in charge, but didn't say much. She left. And then after the event, I got invited to work on the campaign national, like work on the campaign, they call it like National Finance Committee, which is really just fundraising. And I was like, I could do that, fine, no big deal. So I did that and then COVID hit, and so we all went online, and I was like, well, that made it easier because you're just emailing people. And I did that. And right before the election, I get a call from the campaign, and they said, we like you. Would you like to work in D.C.? If he wins, would you like to work in D.C.? And I said, absolutely not. No interest whatsoever. Nope. Because those jobs are like 18 hours a day, and no, I'm not interested. So then the second question was, is there anything you want? And I'm like, no, I don't want anything. I said, because I was thinking board, commission, some, where you're like, you show up for these long meetings. I'm like, I'm not interested in that. And the third question was, there's nothing you would want? And I said, well, if you ask it like that, how about ambassador? And that's how it started. And it took a year. From that call, it took a full year, and I get a call. I'm in my house, and it's a 202 number, and I answer, and it's the young woman who was in my house. She was now the special assistant to the president, responsible for ambassadorships. And she said, Roger, she said, I want to thank you so much for all you did for us, and we're just so grateful, And so I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is the big letdown, right? Because they're like, thanks for your effort, thanks for all your work, and I'm like, oh. And so then she says, we met with the president on Friday, and he would like you to be his next ambassador to Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, Barbados, Saint Vincent and the Grenadines, and Grenada. And I was like, I know at least 3 of those countries. And I heard Barbados, and I'm like, I accept. And she's like, no, you can have a day. I'm like, I don't need a day. So I think that's how, but if, by putting that out there, I just, like, you never know what happens. You never know who you're going to meet. You never know timing. And, like, I was a very unusual ambassador because a lot of them are billionaires. A lot of my friends who are political ambassadors are billionaires, and they don't come from, Washington State. They don't go to school at WSU, and that's, so it was, I think it was smart that the president chose me for this role because I have Native American heritage. I am gay. I am from I grew up in a much smaller town than Pullman. But just there are a lot of reasons that they picked me for that role. But at the end of the day, one of the key things that they liked about my background was my PR experience and my communications experience. And they said, because they knew that I would ramp up this area of the world that is really underappreciated in U.S. policy. but it's a really important region of the world. I think we call it in Barbados. We call the region the America's third border, because if you look at the map, it's like everything from Africa. You know, it's the first country you hit is Barbados from Africa, and you know, when you're in Barbados, it's closer to Africa than it is to Seattle. I mean, it's way out there. It's really, really far. So I think making the case for why people should care about this region. And what I feel good about is the programs that we worked on. Like, I think my 3 priorities were addressing climate change, enhancing regional security, and fostering economic prosperity for all people. I think 2 of those actually should resonate with the current administration, not certainly the climate one, but you know, the other 2 are things they care about, and so we'll see. They have not named a successor, so when an ambassador leaves a post, my deputy, who is a career person, becomes the acting ambassador. Does anyone know what an acting ambassador is called? There's it's a French word. It's chargé d'affaires. Chargé d'affaires. So they just call them chargés. Chargés are the acting ambassadors. But they have roughly the same authority, but they're not confirmed by the Senate, so they don't have the same authority as an ambassador. But so what examples do people see of how communications can make a difference in social and political settings?
I feel like we saw pretty consistently the failure to communicate from the Democratic side during the past election cycle. I feel like that they tried to hit a lot of notes, and none of them clearly succeeded in hitting the target demographics that they were looking for to win. So I feel like that was a lot of failure to communicate substantially.
I would agree with that.
Sometimes listening is as important as talking, especially if you're listening to really understand somebody else's point of view.
I think that's very true.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think having, like, people go into conversations, especially like journalism, you can go in with your own bias and maybe have misconceptions about it, but then having an open mind and talking to whoever is on the receiving party and like really changing your perspectives can be really helpful, I think.
How are people viewing the changing landscape for journalism? Like, I mean, journalism is under attack. It was shrinking, but now it's not only shrinking, it's under attack. And, you know, social media is kind of taking a more dominant role in influencing news and information. Like, what do you all see happening? You know, what trends do you think are positive, and what trends do you think are not positive?
Another thing that's negative is people don't believe what they read outside of their echo chamber at all. Like, if it's anything that doesn't align with their belief, they typically disregard it as fake news.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's totally right. Please.
I would say a positive, especially when the digital, like, social media era. I would say more marginalized groups and unheard voices are getting a little bit larger, maybe seat at the table. There's a little bit, I think, better of an ability for those voices to be heard on social media than there was in, like, traditional media senses. Negative, though, definitely, like, there's a big proliferation of misinformation.
Mm-hmm.
Massively, yeah. And that's making it very difficult.
And how do you know what's real?
It's hard. It's
Yeah.
really hard.
Yeah.
Fact checking, but I mean, that is also hard outside of echo chambers. So.
Thank you.
Adding on to what she said, I think social media, it invites a lot of people to more like quicker access with your information, whether you're getting like from news sources or like third parties. But it also is harder to be able to like fact check that information, and I think that's one of the bigger downsides that like kind of draws people away, and it's kind of like putting a higher attack on journalism because people are trying so hard to get their information in a quick and timely manner, but majority of the time it's really hard to figure out what's true and what's false.
I'll be right behind you. There.
I think a big positive right now is that technology has allowed us to do like foreign media journalism now. like translating has become so much easier, so we can ingest foreign media and foreign news. But that could also be a downside due to the fact that a lot of people don't have foreign media literacy and may not try to take the time to translate it.
That's a really good point.
I think specifically, a large negative was when COVID happened, obviously, and there was misinformation from like our own government departments, and a lot of journalists, were reporting what they believed were facts that were being spread, and even when, well, especially like the CBC, when things were taken back and changed, I think a lot of that fell on journalists who were just reporting the facts that they were given, and I think that's just continued to happen since COVID.
Right. Black shirt.
I think that there's like so much stuff on social media, so many different causes and stuff like that. It's hard for any like one thing to really stand out and there to be change. Like it feels like there's just a different issue every single day that's like trending on Twitter. So it's hard for even if all of these issues do matter, it's hard for like it just for that one issue to like gain the spotlight and gain people's actual attention.
That's good. In the front.
I feel like attention span is a big problem with social media, like short form content. I see a lot of like papers or like news sources, they have reporters doing short form content, but will their readers be able to read the full article? Because like at the end of it they say, make sure to check out the full article on our website, but then no one, I feel like, ever does that because our attention spans are so short. So I worry about like detail and not getting the full story, or maybe just like cherry picking headlines because we're like too lazy to read it.
Yes.
Really off of Norma saying like feeling the full story, I feel like there's a lot of paywalls in like journalism nowadays, and so it's like really hard. Like I tried to look up a story on, let's say, the Seattle Times, and now I have to pay like $7, $3 a month just to get access to that article. So now it's hard to get information because it costs money to get or to involve in journalism. Well, I think journalists should be paid and have an income, but it's kind of hard to balance trying to get your news with also trying to pay artists or journalists and news organizations.
Yeah, that's all great. All very, very insightful. I have a question for you, but I'm going to pass something around. So one of the tools of my diplomacy and a lot of the senior level, if you're a senior level government official, especially in the military, we have these things, they're called challenge coins. And these, when you get one of these, it's actually a really big deal because they're not just given to everybody, they're given to people who have done something special. It's for a reward, or you're someone important and you kind of exchange coins. But this is my coin. I designed it, and you'll see the seven stars are for the 7 countries, but also you'll see my tribal emblem on there. So how many of you are on TikTok?
Wow.
And how many of you are on LinkedIn? Okay, more. How many of you are on Instagram? Okay. And Facebook? Less enthusiastic. What, am I missing anything? Snapchat. No, because it's funny, because in the U.S. government, we were banned from using TikTok and could not use TikTok. And interestingly, so, coming from Washington State, which is a very trade-dependent state, a lot of our farmers send stuff to Asia, technology, Amazon, Microsoft, others, and yet the U.S. government, in certain parts of the world, is competing very heavily with China. And what's happening in the current administration is they're defunding like USAID and other major government functions, which are good. They do good things, but they also help counter China's kind of influence, expansion, and the like. And what was fascinating, because I've always been I would say, I was more pro-China. Like, I'm like, yeah, we trade with China, and we're on the Pacific Rim, but having been in the Eastern Caribbean, I've seen what China's doing in the region. They're using their Belt and Road. You've probably heard, some of you have heard of this. It's their it's kind of their influence campaign they go into a country and they say, you know, we're going to build a sports arena for you for free, but we need you to vote with us in the UN, or we're going to build a hospital for you. But they bring in like all Chinese workers, and they don't really, there's very little economic benefit for the country other than they get a free facility. And historically, those facilities haven't been that well made, but they're getting better. And now without U.S. aid, there's a vacuum, and you know, China is filling it with a lot of different things. But what was interesting is in the region, I had in 7 countries, I had 4 with Chinese embassies and 3 with Taiwanese embassies, and they obviously will not be in the same country, but in one of the countries that I visited, Antigua and Barbuda, beautiful country, the largest building in the entire country is the Chinese embassy, and they're supposed to have like 12 workers there, and it would literally house hundreds of people. So we're like, why do you need an embassy that big? Like, that doesn't make any sense. But you know, they're making choices, you know, in our hemisphere. You know, I was in we call it the Western Hemisphere affairs, was the State Department phrase for it. But it's we saw that happening. Like, and I think we're starting to see stories about China filling the gap where USAID has pulled out and China is filling in. That is definitely concerning. So it's something, it'll be interesting to watch if you like foreign affairs, especially Washington State, because we are such, you know, we trade a lot with China. Like Boeing is a huge trading partner with China. So so when you look at your careers, so I've worked in corporations, startups, large philanthropic organizations, government. I've worked in federal, state, and local government. And what I would say is all of the skills that I started with here are relevant at all of those jobs. Because if you know how to communicate, or if you know how to take a complex topic and boil it down, it is just like you are going to be gold. Because they're called foreign service officers in the embassy, and the people that I enjoyed working with the most were the younger people, because they were not jaded, they were not like 2 years from retirement, they were people that really were trying to do great work and make a name for themselves. Because in the foreign service, if you don't get promoted like every 3 years, or it's like there's this, you get like booted out. Like if you're not on this growth path, you just go home. And so the people who are in the foreign service are very bright. They're generally very ambitious, and until you get to the more advanced people, and they're like just like tired of the bureaucracy, and they're like, oh, they're just kind of calling it in. And so I worked a lot with the I wouldn't call them junior because they're not junior, but the kind of the younger foreign service officers, because they were so like they were the stars, and they would help make sure that the programs that we developed were successful. And so much, you know, it's funny because you hear a lot in communications fields like, oh, I don't want to do like special events. That just sounds so fluffy and like, you know, no, I don't want to do that. Events are incredibly powerful. Like I've always done fundraisers and things, and they're just like, what, you know, you can, whatever. But when you start doing more like diplomatic events, or there's a purpose why you're going to a certain event, and who are the people that you have to interact with, and you know, oh, and if I arrange the table just like this, these two people are going to sit next to each other for 2 hours, you know, and so there's a strategy behind it, and that was really fascinating to me, of how you use these tools, and it's not just, it's not just how do you write a press release. Like that is, those days are probably numbered in a lot of ways. So, if you can, be part of a strategy discussion, because you want to be, I think, in my mind, being a trusted advisor is kind of the role that I play now in my career. It's like I want to be the person that people call to help solve problems, or that they know that I'll give them candid advice, because you don't often get, shockingly, when you're an ambassador, no one tells you anything, nothing. You get nothing. You get literally nothing. So my senior leadership team, it's called Country Team. It looks just like this room. So we're in Country Team right now. I have all the agency heads, flanking me all the way around. And then we have staff or kind of people who are filling in on the periphery. And I would say good morning. And what would happen? Yeah, it would be just like that. And so I'd say, good morning. And they would be like, yeah, I know. It's like, but it's just funny. And then, I would ask questions like, so, they were so not used to having a dialogue that they would just, it's safer to say nothing. And so they would just say nothing. Or they don't want to give you bad news, and certainly not in front of other people, because that would be bad, because then they might look bad. And so, like, a lot of times you just would get nothing. You get no, like, so what is happening? Like, what is going on in the embassy? We had 200 people in the embassy and 7 countries. Like, stuff's happening. So it's, I don't know, if your ability to give candid feedback, I think, is also a real asset, because I don't think everyone wants it, but I think if you have the confidence to give someone feedback, there's a great technique that I do try to use, and you can borrow it if you'd like. So positive feedback is you answer the question, what, why. So what you see, and why it made a positive impression on you. So you're looking at behaviors, not how you made me feel and all this. You created that report for me, on an impossible deadline, and it was, I hardly had to make any changes, and I got it to my boss, on time, and she was super happy. And so the what, why. So for positive feedback. For constructive feedback, it's what, why. What you see, what you want to see, and why. So I asked for the report on Friday. You missed the deadline. And that made me look bad to my boss. And what I want to see is that you need to make sure that, I'll be checking in next time to make sure you're on task or on the timeline to meet my deadline. And it's really important for your my credibility with my boss and your credibility with me to meet those deadlines. So why is great, because it takes it out of the personal, and it's less about you're a good person, a bad person, I'm really mad at you, those types of things. So that is a tool that I use, and that I borrowed that from Starbucks. That was a organizational development tool from Starbucks. But I think that in your career, I think as you pick up things, you can apply them, because I think that my main message to you is I think you have to ask for what you want, because people aren't going to divine that from, you might be the smartest person, have the highest grades, but if no one knows that you want to be, that you want to work in PR in LA, then they're going to be referring you to jobs in, Spokane or Seattle or whatever. It's like you just have to kind of own it and just say, hey, I'm really interested in this, and you just put it out there. And it may not happen, or it may happen in a different way, but that's okay, because you never know how your path will I mean, I never thought I'd be an ambassador, but I knew that if I was, I'd be a good one. And that's really how it happened. I really believe that. I don't think there is any, like, you can even look me up on, I was probably the lowest donor ambassador in the Biden administration. Like, I gave less money than anybody. They just liked me. They liked me. They liked that I worked hard for them. I didn't do it to get anything. They knew that because they were offering me things. And I'm like, no, I don't have anything. So, anyone have questions of me?
With like the kind of kids these days bias, how do you, this kind of dual-edged, how do you as a younger professional fight imposter syndrome and fight gatekeeping to enact sustainable change? So for example, you said you liked working with the younger employees in the office because they had some really innovative and exciting ideas, but oftentimes there's this roadblock where they're like, well, you're the youngest person here, so your voice doesn't carry as much weight. What kind of like words of wisdom would you have in order to push your career further and maybe fight some of that?
And I think it's not, I think, you're not going to win fighting the system, but I think find an advocate within the organization who's a senior person that says, you know, I want to say, do you have any special projects? I'm doing all my work. Is there anything I can do for you? And I have a friend whose daughter is in San Francisco. She's a recent grad, and she was like hungry. And so she went out and she told the CEO, like she just said, I have more capacity. I could do more things. So guess what? Her next job's going to be, she's working directly for the CEO. So he literally grabbed her and said, you're going to be my person. I want people like that working for me. Like, and so I think you just have to, you raise your hand, and one person says no big deal. Thank you. You look for an advocate and look for mentors. I mean, mentorship is huge. And I will tell you, the people that I met here at this school are people that made a huge difference in my career, and that I'm still in touch with. Like, I'm having dinner tomorrow night with 2 people who made a huge difference in my career that I met at Pullman. So, yeah. Other questions? Okay, 2 minutes, please.
You just said like you won't fight the system, or you won't win fight the system. But the way the system is now, it's like the news cycle doesn't exist really, because information just goes out so fast, and so politicians don't really need journalism anymore, and they don't really want journalists really to report on them, because they'll report on everything they're doing, and they only want to put out the information that makes them look good. So in a system like that, where people don't want to see the truth, and people don't really want you to report on objectively on everything, or at least the higher ups don't, like this current administration doesn't. How do you kind of fit into that system without being a part of it and affecting change?
I think that's a great question. I think you have to own your truth, and if you're like, this is what is important to me, then go for it. Like, don't let anyone put you in a box, and you're like, I'm going to keep doing this because it does matter. Having credible, truthful, authentic, coverage. Like, there's got to be some, reaction at some point, because all this garbage that's out there now, it's like, I think there's a point where people are like, you just tune out. So like, having credible media and people who like, I love the whole Signal chat room thing. I love that. Like, we never did that. Well, here it is. So I think, you just have to be true to yourself. Like, if it's something that you want it to do and pursue, do it. Like, don't let anyone tell you no. Yeah.
Thank you.
Final question. Anyone with a last question?
What's the most rewarding project or experience that you've had throughout your professional career?
Oh, wow. I will go quick because we're at time, but my most rewarding experience actually came out of frustration with the system, the State Department bureaucracy, which I found incredibly difficult. And I decided midway through my term to stop asking for permission. And I did it because I knew, like, I could, because I was ambassador. And I was like, I'm not going to ask. And if they have a problem with it, then they can talk to Joe Biden. So what I did is I secured almost $1 billion in financing for the region. 500 million for Barbados, 300 million for St. Kitts and Nevis, that I brokered between there's an organization called the XM Bank, the Export-Import Bank, which is a U.S. federal agency, and the country. But it didn't involve, we didn't sign it at the embassy. I didn't sign it, but I made it happen. So I got $1 billion worth of financing that they can use for infrastructure, for, planes to monitor for narcotics trafficking. They could, there's this huge multi-generational opportunities for these countries that I did that. And I know I did it because I called the CEO of the Export-Import Bank and we made it happen. And I sent, this is my little petty Roger. After the day that we signed these 2 agreements, and we had the prime ministers come, and it was big signing ceremonies and media, and I sent a text to the assistant secretary and the deputy assistant secretary, who were kind of the senior people in my kind of line. And I said, oh, FYI, we secured $1 billion worth of financing today for blah, blah, blah. But it was already done. I didn't ask for permission. And, one of them was like, that's amazing. And the other was like, what? What? How did this happen? Send us the documents. I'm like, whatever. So I think you have to know where you're willing to stand up and fight. And I think you have to sometimes, absolutely. And especially now. So thank you. Thanks, everybody.